Inshallah, start. We start? Okay. Inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. We begin by evening with the Tahiyyat al-Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakum Allah khair for waiting, and inshallah we will commence a new inshallah series as such. We spent the last 3 times I was in your presence about Surah Al-Fatiha, and we sort of did a good effort in trying to cover as much as we can from this amazing surah. And in line with the same principle of trying to extrapolate very beneficial gems from the Quran that are of benefit for our modern day life, today we will start a new sort of series that talks about a very, very interesting description or declaration that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discloses about the nature of human beings. The whole idea of diving deep into the Quran is to understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or our guidance of Islam, is not just about a set of rituals of 5 times a day prayer, or do this, don't do this, do it this way, don't do it that way. There's a lot more wisdom behind it, and if you just leave it at the do's and don'ts, you often have a very, very dry relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whereas if you understand the true nature of the miraculous guidance that comes from the Quran, and how Allah, by telling us how He knows us, and by telling us what's good for us and what's bad for us through His guidance, then you start to sort of have a more mature relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in that I don't just follow the commandments out of because my culture says this, or my parents do this, or just purely out of fear, or purely hunting the reward. A more mature relationship, which you can only extrapolate by sort of extracting these gems from the Quran, is I do this because I know that's better for me. And so it becomes a different kind of mentality. So what we'll talk about today in Surah Al-Ma'arij needs a bit of an introduction first to understand how it fits in modern day life, especially in the very politically correct, self-entitled age that we live in, that's driven by social media and this and that. So Surah Al-Ma'arij is a Meccan surah. And what I mean by that, it was revealed at the time Prophet ﷺ was in Mecca, and the majority of the surahs in Mecca are discussing things directly with the non-believers, about a challenge that the non-believers, or ridiculing that the non-believers used to have. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first answers them, and then sets out some not acts of worship per se, but principles of thinking. Principles of thinking. Because before you do an act of worship, before you do this or you don't do this, you're always thinking, why am I doing this? Why does Allah want me to do this? So Surah Al-Ma'arij begins with an event that happened at the time of Prophet ﷺ, where they would come up to him and ridicule him, and they say, سَأَلَ سَائِلٌ بِعَذَابٍ وَاقِعٍ, where they would come and say, is there really going to be a punishment? Is there really going to be a day of judgment? Are we really going to be questioned, and we're going to go to heaven or hell? Like right at the root cause of the whole discussion, why you should be a Muslim or you shouldn't be a Muslim. And so Prophet ﷺ was always refuting or answering these claims by revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Surah Al-Ma'arij in chapter number 19 onwards, and verse number 19 onwards, discloses a emotional thought process that happens in people who are, between brackets, on the pathway to becoming rejectors of the Day of Judgment. So these sort of thought processes that we'll disclose today and inshallah in the future is coupled with the discussion at the start of Surah Al-Ma'arij, where the disbelievers are basically refuting that there's going to be accountability or consequences for their oppression and their actions. This disclosure by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in line with something that is of importance for us to understand. I'm not sure if I shared it with you or not in this congregation, but there is a acknowledgement in Surah Yunus, which is in the Surah, of the innate emotions that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put inside human beings. Now, this is maybe a little bit strange, so I need you to listen very carefully. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us. We are a body, physical body, we're a mind, and we are ruh, or a soul. When I say ruh, everybody understand what a ruh is? Soul? Okay. He has put innate emotions in us. Very simply, we have anger in us, we have happiness in us, we have greed in us, we have desire in us. So He's put them in us, subhanahu wa ta'ala. These emotions were put in us for a purpose, i.e. that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Creator, knows that the human being needs those emotions, innate emotions, to function properly. Now the question is, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put anger in us, how can you blame someone who's excessively angry? Or how can you blame someone who's excessively greedy? And so on and so on. The reality is, when you understand how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has coupled the emotions with the guidance, you start to acknowledge that the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, first and foremost, teaches you how to use these emotions in the correct avenue and in the correct quantity. And so when a human being, I'll repeat, so the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables the human being to use the correct emotion in the correct quantity in the correct avenue. So anger is there, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also says, وَالْكَاظِمِينَ الْغَيْظِ, those that suppress anger. So there are avenues that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is mentioned to tell us that are okay to express anger, and outside these avenues, anger is not worth it. There are avenues where you need to be sort of possessive of certain things, but outside these avenues, it's not worth it. There are avenues for chivalry, there are avenues for, between brackets, healthy rujula or muru'ah, for jealousy for men and women over their spouses. Over and outside that, it's not healthy, and so on and so on. And so the human being who is not connected to the guidance of the creator of the emotions, the creator of the emotions, doesn't know which avenues are right and wrong to use these emotions, or how much of anger, or how much of greed, or how much of this should I be expressing this avenue. And so they start to express the emotions in the wrong quantities and in the wrong avenues. And that's when human beings run into trouble. So to summarize this introduction, the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala enables you to use the innate emotions that He's put in you in the correct quantity and in the correct avenue. Without His guidance, human beings use the emotions like anger, like greed, like all sorts of emotions in the wrong avenues and in the wrong quantities, and then problems happen at an individual level, at a family level, at a society level, and at a world level. In Surah Al-Ma'arij, after this lengthy introduction, in Surah Al-Ma'arij, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ خُلِقَ هَلُوعًا إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. This is verse 19 onwards from Surah Al-Ma'arij, verse chapter 70. وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. So the emotional state that is in you and that can be used inappropriately if not channeled by the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the state of haloo'. This is a difficult word to pronounce in English, haloo'. So HALLOO'A, HALOO'A, as he written on the poster. And so today we will share what that incorrect emotional sort of disease is when not channeled properly. And then we will, inshallah, as our time allows in the future, we will also discuss the treatments or the prevention from this disease manifesting itself in the inappropriate avenues and the inappropriate quantities. Because one thing we got to understand, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put these emotions in us for a reason. And so when you manifest it incorrectly, they cause problems. But the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when there's problems, there's a solution. So the solution is there in Surah Al-Ma'arij. So about 8 things that a believer or a human being needs to do to prevent the state of, or the disease of haloo' manifesting inappropriately in the incorrect avenues and in the incorrect quantity. So the word haloo', to understand what it means, I want you to imagine there's sort of two separate avenues to understand the meaning. There is the linguistic avenue, and there is the Quranic tafsir of the word haloo' as well. And so about an added bonus is that historically we've focused on the linguistic avenue from looking at what the linguistic scholars used to say. But there's a very cool dimension of understanding the Quran, which is to understand the Quran by other verses from the Quran. So the word haloo', I'm going to explain what it means linguistically, and that'll give you a picture of what that person is. But then also the subsequent two verses, verse 20, verse 21, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala summarizes the main characteristics of the person that is haloo', which is the state of jazu' and the state of manu'. And I deliberately choose not to translate these key words because they are very meaty, between brackets. The problem with the Arabic language is that there's no one word for word with the English language. So one word in Arabic requires sometimes paragraphs in English to get the context of the meaning. And that's why that language was chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be the final language of the Quran. So, the word haloo' has linguistically, now we're going to start understanding what it means linguistically, multiple layers of meaning. Not just one, multiple layers of meaning, but they will all lead to sort of the same image or picture. The word haloo' encompasses someone when the disease is fully developed who is got the trait of being a coward, not in terms of being like a chicken between brackets, not willing to fight, but a reactive kind of cowardness to anything. That person is also very irritable. That haloo' person is very irritable. That haloo' person is very greedy. That haloo' person is very desperate or excessive in reaction. Now, the word excessive is important because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say, Innal insana khuliqa haloo'. Haloo' in Arabic means just one moment or one dimension or at a particular time the symptoms manifest. But haloo'ah in Arabic alludes to exaggeration. So this person is always desperate, always irritable, always greedy. You see, an excessive use of these sort of innate emotions. Yeah, you need to be, between brackets, greedy to a certain extent. You need to have some money saved for a rainy day. You need to. We're human beings, we have ups and downs. But when it's excessive, that's when the problem is. That's why the Quran captures that excessiveness that's problematic by adding one letter in Arabic. Haloo'ah is an exaggeration, meaning that this person is excessively desperate and irritable and greedy and cowardice. That's one dimension. The other, this is going to be more relative to the young people's lingo. Have anybody heard of the word hanger? So wives will try and make sure food is ready for the husband because if he's hungry, he's hangry. Or if you see your missus very upset because she's hungry, you go, oh, better get some nice food because she's going to be hangry. See that in the workplace, people rush as the morning progresses, they become irritable and reactive because they're hungry. That hangry phenomena, believe it or not, is associated with the status of haloo'. Because in the Arabic language, when an animal was not fed well, like for example a sheep or a camel that was not fed, it used to become very, very irritable and would react aggressively to any human being that approaches it. So they say that this animal, because of the emptiness on the inside, and because of that emptiness causing excessive anger and excessive irritability, that animal is haloo'. So it's the imagery of the individual is shallow on the inside, empty on the inside, and because of that emptiness or shallowness or lack of sort of between brackets spiritual concrete deep down inside, they are easily triggered. AKA in modern day life, a Karen. Yeah? A Karen now is a modern day term that is beautifully summarizes what the person who is haloo'. because they just get triggered over the most trivial things in life. But a lot of us, whether we realize or not, we have some Karen moments in our life that are not captured on viral YouTube videos or Twitter videos or TikTok videos. Let me give you some examples that apply to the Muslim community. Like for example, Ramadan. Summer's getting long, and the days are getting longer, and now, at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and the iftar is going to be 2 hours later, and you start to get irritable before iftar. Everything irritates you. Your daughter or your son comes to you, or your partner, your spouse comes to you, leave me alone. I'm hangry. Yeah? That irritability gives you a sort of an image of what it's like to be haloo'. Or sometimes, the sambusa is triangle, not round, and the pilau is not to your level of spice, or these kind of simple things that are irritable to someone deep down inside. That's a very, very small symptom to keep in mind of what haloo' is. Or somebody cuts you off in the middle of the road just because they're cocky or they're fast, road rage moment, and then all of a sudden your blood pressure goes to 500 and you want to react immediately. That snappiness, that immediate I need to respond in an excessive manner over something that in the bigger picture means nothing. That's one of the symptoms of what haloo' is. And so you can imagine that kind of individual personality, that when we have individual moments of haloo' here and there, all of us, which we try and compose ourselves and regulate ourselves and make sure it doesn't happen. But there are some individuals who don't recognize that this is a problem, and haloo'ah becomes their personality. So they are irritable all the time. They are greedy all the time. They're desperate all the time in every little avenue in life, whether they're husband, whether they're wife, whether they're brother or sister, or at work or at school. Always desperate, always desperate. Everything is a panic, everything is a rush. All of that is what haloo' means linguistically. Okay. So you can see the image of what al-haloo' is. It's in all of us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when I talked about the surah being a conversation between Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the non-believers who are challenging him, some people might say, well, the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is replying to the kuffar here. It doesn't apply to me being born a Muslim. The reality is, Allah chose the word of insan on purpose. He didn't say inna al-kuffara or inna the non-believers are haloo'. He said inna al-insan. Every human being has the inner state in them. And if you don't learn the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to use that in the appropriate amount, it will manifest to be a problem. Big problem. We can all see that. We can all see that how the shallowness that's been developed in individuals leads to big problems in families and communities and societies. Low tolerance. One of the other images of haloo' is low tolerance to anything. It leads to a lot of problems. So nobody can take any constructive feedback. No one can take any criticism. Everybody's offended by the smallest thing. Or you can't even tell someone, oh, how come you're wearing this, or what happened the other day? You can't tell anybody anything these days. Because everybody's pretty much has become a haloo'. Just very, very reactive to any sort of feedback. And you wonder why, well, okay, we understand about non-Muslims, but in Islam, the concept of nasiha and sincere advice is part of the religion. Yet all of a sudden, everybody's immune from sincere, loving advice. Not critical finger pointing and destructive feedback. That's not what we're talking about. But the element of advising each other for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is part of the religion. Because nobody is perfect. And if a brother wants to lovingly advise you about something, now, let's face it, we're all scared of advising someone because we're scared of the reaction. Somebody will advise someone, say, oh, there's murderers out there. Why do you come to advise me? Go look for the real problematic people. I'm fine. That's a haloo'. That's a classical example of a haloo'. So, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, and then the human being is haloo'. We talked about the linguistic meaning. Now let's talk about the Quranic tafsir, which I said is a new dimension of cool way of understanding what haloo'ah is, and that's described in the following two verses. So haloo'ah linguistically has multiple layers of meaning. We've talked about it now. But then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala goes and specifies that out of all these meanings, these two traits are what really shows and displays that disease of haloo'ah. And what are these real two things? Ya Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا وَإِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. And I'll spend a bit of time to talk about these words so you get an understanding why that language is used by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, the word mess, meme with a fatha and seen taskeen. Mess as in messy without the I. M-E-S-S. Not like messy as in stuff everywhere. No, mess. In Arabic, it refers to a little trigger. The littlest of trigger. If I was to give it to you in an example of something that really resonates, now it's winter, everybody's had a cold sometime this winter. And you know how before a cold, you start to feel that little tickle in your throat? A little tickle? And you go, oh, I feel something is coming on. That is the sort of example of a mess. It's not like you've been hit by a bus or you've broken a bone. You feel something small. That is the imagery example of mess. So imagine, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the individual that is haloo'ah, how do I diagnose myself? When that little mess, when that little feeling or that little trigger comes my way, in terms of potential harm, I become jazur. Keyword here, jazur. The word jazur, the easiest way to sort of summarize the many meanings of it is that quick to snap. Quick to collapse. The Arabs used to say, if I grab a rope that is strong, I can't tear it apart. But if I grab a rope and it snaps very easily, that rope is jazur. Snaps very quickly. I.e., there is a total collapse, there's total destruction, there's inability to tolerate. The slightest, we're talking about the slightest touch or the slightest trigger, i.e. the Karens out there, i.e. the irritability and the politically correct society out there. Notice that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking down at these traits. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is looking down at these traits. Why? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, this is a disease, and one of the biggest symptoms is that when that individual is touched by a little trigger of potential harm, they are jazur, they collapse, they disintegrate. Why is that a problem? I need you to expand your thinking here now. We all openly declare out loud that we are the ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Correct? What we have from Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is his sunnah, is his legacy, and one of the biggest legacy of Islam is the creation of world-changing men or world-changing human beings, to be fair to both genders. World-changing human beings, i.e. human beings who, when they have properly accepted Islam, their thought perspective changes and they're able to achieve huge things of huge benefit to this world. In essence, you can sort of correlate the relationship of the ummah with the true guidance for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One way to correlate it or measure it to see what are we actually producing and achieving on a grand scale. And so a person who is inheriting the legacy of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to try and prepare for the hereafter, to try and be a good husband, to try and be a good wife, to try and be a good brother, try and be a good sister, to try and be a good worker, to try and be a healthy person, to try and make a change in their community and society, that individual doesn't have time to be narrow-minded. That individual really, to achieve all these things, need to have, between brackets, a big world view, a big perspective. And so a person who is jazur indirectly has got a narrow perspective, is narrow-minded, has got a small world that they live in, or between brackets, a small bubble. And so, oh, okay, are we Muslims immune from that? Yeah, alhamdulillah, we're preparing for the akhirah. We all have big world perspective. The reality of the ummah, that's not the case. It's the reality. Let's be blatantly honest with that. And hopefully this is not a Karen reaction kind of thing. This is constructive feedback for myself and for everybody, is that our ummah is unfortunately has narrowed down its perspective so much in what we should be achieving in this life. Alhamdulillah, we all aim and acknowledge that we need to prepare for the hereafter, but there's something to be done in this world as well. So for example, our goals as families and our communities is to, send the kids to school, get them to uni, get them a job, marry them off, retire, job done. No matter which Muslim society or culture you go across, if you do a survey of the families, that's the shared goal between everybody. And we think that that is a high and mighty sort of step-by-step achievement in life. But in reality, that's been the same steps that every human being from every family, from every culture, from all the ages do. So what's so different? The Muslim has a bigger perspective. The person who is jazu' narrows down their life to just these things. So for example, you have family feuds between in-laws and between sister-in-laws and between mother-in-laws, and she looked at me this way and he said that and she said this. Just truly reflective of a jazu' mentality where the whole world is narrowed down to these petty little things. Whereas a human being with a big perspective, be it Muslim or not, is free from the sickness of jazu'. Let me give you an example, to give you a sort of a practical example. Everybody in Melbourne and in New Zealand, where I come from, complains about how tough property is and real estate is and how hard it is to find a house and renting and so on and so on. It's so expensive, so on and so on. And so if somebody's renting, everybody's looking at them like, oh my God, how can you be doing that? You're going to die. You're not secure. And if they're ejected, well, what are you going to do now? That's the perspective of the people living in that environment. But if you remove yourself from that perspective and compare yourself to someone, for example, in Gaza, do you think you have a problem? You don't. I'm renting in Melbourne, I'm renting in regional Melbourne, I'm renting somewhere in the outback. I still have a roof over my head and I'm not getting bombed. Big perspective, small perspective. If you trap yourself in the small perspective, life becomes very ugly. And if you free yourself and expand your mind to be that of the legacy of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where we have a big perspective, where we are aiming to do some changes in this life and win success in the hereafter, then the trivial things that people complain about won't bother you. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to acknowledge that the status of jazu' is not befitting of a good believer, of a good Muslim. It's not befitting. You've got bigger things to aim for than the trivial little things that everybody squabbles around. That's why the state of jazu' is looked down upon. And it's destructive for the human. I mean, you can see how people who are trapped in the state of jazu' don't really have a healthy life. Because they're never satisfied. They have what they have, but they're never satisfied because they're always looking for other things to complain about. The nature of life is people now complaining. That's the nature of life. You open the internet about a business, all you see is some good reviews. Everybody's very quick to put negative reviews. It's always the commentary and the feedback and the discussion is always about problems and negativity. Nothing about, alhamdulillah, what can we do better? Because at the end of the day, in order for you to do something better, something grand, you need energy, correct? You need mental energy, you need physical energy, you need time. But me and you, as a human being, we don't have an infinite amount of energy that's mental and physical. We have a limited amount of energy. So if you're going to just spend it on complaining all the time, your energy is going to run out. So you have the mental decision to choose, and I have a limited amount of mental energy and physical energy. I need to choose where I'm going to spend it. Am I going to spend it in the big perspective of the legacy of Prophet ﷺ, or am I going to spend it and waste it on the jazu' mentality. The question is really up to you. And that sort of mentality we need to eliminate from the next generation. The next generation is trapped in the jazu' mentality and self-evaluation and self-feedback and so on and so on. They are really, really struggling with the big perspective. It's one of the biggest challenging as parents we have, to make sure that the perspective of our young kids is big, not narrow. Tough, but we need to talk about it. How do you do that as a parent? That's a conversation for another time. It could be that you need to take them away and makes them see how much of a blessing they have in Melbourne. Don't go, for example, go to Umrah, take them to Southeast Asia. See how everybody is struggling there financially, and the houses are so much less, and there's no electricity, and there's no safe water, and this and that. And their world will be a lot bigger than when you're just trapped in that simple bubble. So that is the concept of the word jazu' make sense? إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ جَزُوعًا. And interestingly, that the articulation and the order of the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses doesn't make it a sort of a theoretical situation. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الشَّرُّ is saying whenever a small amount of potential harm touches them. I.e., like the reality of life is you're going to have amounts of, between brackets, potential harm, and you're going to have good coming your way, whether you like it or not. So each one of us can actually go home tonight and think about, what are some moments that I've had, what are some issues and challenges that I've faced, and how is my reaction to it? Am I actually a jazu'? Or think in your own individual network, in your own life, do you have individuals that really, really irritate you and make you sort of react in a manner that's not you, between brackets? And ask yourself, are these individuals really worth it? Or is my reaction really fulfilling or in line with the bigger legacy of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam or not? Really important, because every single one of us has got that sort of friend or family member or co-worker or colleague that sometimes, or a Facebook group or Facebook that triggers them and makes them a Karen and react in a very, very inappropriate way. And one thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes clear in the Quran by disclosing these sort of bad, between brackets, traits when used inappropriately, is that you can't use self-victimization as a tool to justify your inappropriate reaction. Like, for example, if somebody triggers you and triggers you and triggers you and you explode, you can't say, oh, wallahi, that's not really me when I exploded. No, as they say, akhi, or brother or sister, that is you when you exploded. You let the narrow perspective hone in your mind, so you thought that it's appropriate to explode at that particular moment. Whereas if your mind is bigger in perspective, nothing like that will happen. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been giving you some really, really harsh reality checks here, is that we're not sort of pure, beautiful, angelic creatures. Remember that. The human being has a tendency and the ability to go really bad. But the human being also has a tendency and an ability to become really good. And the real challenge is for you to make sure that the good is being nourished and nutrition, and the bad, when it comes to the surface every now and then, we learn from it, we suppress it, but we don't deny that it exists. We're not angelic creatures. Even though when we talk between us, and when, for example, we go to a business proposal or a marriage proposal, we portray ourselves as these angels that have come from the seventh heaven on earth. I am the best candidate for your daughter, I am the best candidate for your son, these kind of things. The reality is no one is an angel. Everybody has flaws and good traits. Everybody. When you acknowledge that, you're at peace. When you acknowledge that your wife has flaws and good traits, you as a husband have flaws and good traits. Everybody here, from this humble person speaking here to the Imam in Mecca, they all have flaws and good traits. That's the reality of human beings. Let's stop pretending that we're angelic creatures. Makes it easier to live life and be humble in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Alright, so that is jazu'. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala then says, another very clear description of a person that the disease of haloo'ah has come to the surface, is that إِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. And the word mess again is used. So whenever a little bit of good comes their way, they become keyword manu'. What does manu' mean? What does manu' mean? It's a very, very interesting trait that is very, very, very applicable in modern time, because I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with economics, but the reality is that we live in a very, very capitalistic world. Now, what is capitalism all about? In order to explain what the word manu' is. Capitalism as an economic system teaches the individual that you are someone that is never satisfied, and you must accumulate and accumulate and accumulate. So a silly example, if you have 3 houses and you only have you, your wife and your son, it's time to get the 4th. Time to aim for the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th. Now, accumulation that is being used for a bigger purpose is fine. But accumulation for the sake of accumulation is what manu' is. Let's make a very, very clear distinction difference, is that there is nothing in Islam that says you shouldn't be wealthy. There's nothing that says that. But Islam teaches you that when you have wealth, that's a test, because that wealth needs to be used in a particular way. So accumulation of wealth without using it in a particular way, without sharing it with people who are in need, is what manu' is. Accumulation of wealth and sharing it with those that need after you fulfill your needs is a huge blessing. But the capitalism and the world that you live in right now teaches you, whether you realize it or not, through social media, through the education, through the talks that we have, is that for you to be content, you need to accumulate. And once you accumulate, you need to accumulate more. And once you reach it, you need to accumulate more. And the problem with that is a manu' linguistically means someone inside an impenetrable fortress. So back in the medieval days, they used to have a castle. They have a city. They have all the farms outside the castle, outside the walls, and then they will take all the good and store it inside the walls. And so inside the wall, everything is manu'. Everything is protected. People from the outside can't get to it. So for example, if this fortress had more than 2 years worth of crops in it, and the next town over was facing some harvest difficulties, when they come to ask for some help, they can't access the crops because the people in the fortress are keeping it inside and not sharing. Even though their harvest is not touched, they will grow and more. They will grow and grow. So it's not saying that you need to give away what you have so you don't become manu'. No, you look after yourself first, but the excess that you have needs to be shared with those that are in need. Does that make sense? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we're not talking about excess khair, we're not talking about huge amounts of wealth. When you have a little bit of goodness coming your way, you become possessive. You become stingy. You don't feel the need to share. And that is derived from the state of haloo'ah, because remember, the state of haloo'ah is someone who's very shallow, who's very empty. So when they get something, they become extremely possessive. And they don't want to share because they feel threatened that if they give it, because of their small-minded perspective, not big-minded, they think, I'm going to die or everything's going to finish, so I need to hold on to it. And some people will hold on to 10,000, some people hold on to 1,000, some people hold on to $10, but in their mind, I must hold on, I can't give. Big problem. This is what the world is teaching us what a successful business person is. And you got to be very careful of that, because when you hear it over and over in social media, in the conversations that you have from your work colleagues, you start, whether you realize it or not, it starts being implanted in your mind that that is the way to go forward. That must be correct because everybody's doing it. But that's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ مَنُوعًا. Be very, very careful of being a manu'. Be very, very careful. Now, when I say manu', everybody automatically thinks about money. But the reality is the word that's chosen by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is khayr, not mal. Mal in Arabic is money. In the Quran, in this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala massahu al-khayr. Good. Now goodness comes in many shapes and sizes and forms. For some people it could be knowledge, and I'll share how people can be manu' in terms of knowledge. For some people it could be time. For some people it could be information. For some people it could be health. Like for example, when it comes to knowledge, you might have a family member or a cousin that you're competing with that are both trying to get into this medical school or to this very good school. And one of them is 1 year ahead. He did the exam or she did the exam and they got in. And so your cousin gives you a call and says, hey look, you did the exam. Can you help me? And give me some tips about it? No. So this person that's passed the exam has the knowledge, has the information, and there's a decision to be made. If I share the information, the cousin that I'm competing with is going to get in. But if I don't share or share the incorrect information, they might not get in, and I will hold on to my prestige status in my perceived little world in the family that I am the one that got in and my cousin didn't. That is a very small example of what manu' is. You have a big example that we face as health professionals, and I'm sure all other industries face. Very, very experienced and qualified health professionals coming from overseas. It's a very, very difficult path in these parts of the world to become a registered doctor or registered nurse or registered dentist if you've studied overseas. Even though you have all the skills or majority of the skills and you just need a bit of tweaking. Why is that? Because those that are already in that industry are manu'. If they don't feel threatened, they will let you in. But because they feel threatened that you might come and your numbers might expand and you might eventually start eating a chunk of their pie, they don't allow it to get in, or they make the process very difficult. So only the elite and the elite of the best get in. And then in modern day community, you can't see a doctor for 3 weeks. You can't see a dentist for so many weeks. Not because there's no doctors, but because the authority, the regulars of doctors are the classical example of manu'. You have very qualified doctors that are driving Uber. Because either they can't afford the exam or the regulations don't allow them to work. And then I see in the pharmacy people who are very, very sick and can't see a doctor. Why is that? It stems all the way down from this al-manu'. The authority and the individuals there feel threatened, therefore they will not share the resources, i.e. they will not share the population that needs more doctors because they want to hold on. They are manu'. SubhanAllah. It's a devastating emotional state to be controlled by, to be manu'. Stingy is a word that's used specifically for money, but manu' is a bigger term. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say إِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ بَخِيلٌ. Bakhil is stingy when it comes to money. إِذَا مَسَّهُ الْخَيْرُ manu' is a bigger term. It's a trait that whatever good comes your way, you start to hold on to it. And you don't want to share it because you feel threatened. And so, again, we're not angels, we're not perfect. We need to go home and examine, what sort of elements of manu' do I have in my life? Do I have that element of manu' in me? Do I feel threatened to share my time or share my effort or share a bit of money or share a bit of knowledge? Or am I just one of those people that has been colonized by capitalism and my idea of success is just keep, accumulate. Very, very important question. Allah doesn't want you to be like that. I know the society is painting the picture that the successful individual is one that keeps and accumulates, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't want you like that. Because society that is manu' is a very selfish society, a very individualistic society. And aren't we living in such a society now? No one knocks on the neighbor next door. No one knows what's happening next door. People die next to each other in the houses and no one knows each other. Everybody's just concerned with themselves. It's stemming from, it's just about me, me, me. And that is the state of manu'. Whereas if you are about, the Muslim is all about myself and the wider community, myself and the bigger perspective, you don't become manu'. Or you fight being a manu'. It's easy to be a manu', and it's a lot more challenging to be somebody who's not manu'. It is challenging, it's not easy. But we're not here to just live an easy life. We're here to achieve big grand goals. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is reminding you again, please do not be a jazu'. Do you have any elements of jazu' in your life? And please do not be a manu'. Do you have any manu' elements in your life? And if you do, it's time to sort of eliminate them as much as you can. But also recognizing that we're not angels, there will be moments of slip-ups here and there, but that shouldn't be the norm, that should be the exception. Now, I've been talking for a good 40 minutes about haloo', jazu', manu'. I want to just give you a big step outside from the details and the bigger picture. Haloo' is the big umbrella term of this emotional trait that we don't want to come to the surface in full. And linguistically, it's got multiple layers of meaning, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sort of gives you the meat of those two things, and they are jazu' and manu'. Don't be a jazu' or try and reduce being a jazu', being irritable, being quickly to snap whenever something triggers you. And don't be a manu', i.e. a stingy keeper, accumulator that feels threatened and doesn't want to share anything that you have that you perceive as good. Okay, now the last 50 minutes we've been talking about how bad the human being is. You know, we're quite stingy, we're quite shallow, we're Karens, we react, and so it's a pretty dim picture, to be honest. But then there's other places in the Quran where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala glorifies the creation of the human being. وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. So there are very clear verses in the Quran that tell you that the human being has got some very, very bad traits. And there are some very, very clear verses in the Quran that tell you that the human being is a wonderful creation, has got the potential to do amazing things. How do we balance between the two? Because it can be confusing. If you think you're just a beautiful creation, you'll think you're an angel. And if you think you're bad, you'll fall into depression. How do we balance between the two? I want you to hear me out, and inshallah we'll stop after about 10 minutes. And we'll open the floor for questions and answers. It all comes down to the basic principles of who you are at the essence. You are a physical body, you are a thinking mind, and you are a ruh, a soul. Correct? To get this point across, I want you to think of the story of Adam alayhi salam and Iblis la'natullahi alayhi. So we all know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala molded Adam alayhi salam from clay in Jannah, and then he blew into him his ruh, and then he ordered the angels to prostrate. Remember this order. We often say this sequence in a very, very quick way because we've been hearing the stories from when the kids were in their mum's crib. But the order is important. Allah molded the physical human being from clay, and then blew into him the ruh or the spirit, and then the commandment to prostrate came. Which means that without the ruh or the spirit from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you're just a piece of clay. We all understand that. The moment we die and this ruh disappears, you become a very smelly piece of something. And everybody's trying to bury you as quickly as possible because no one can bear the smell of your stinking corpse. That's a reality of us. That's the reality of the human being. So in essence, your true gem of who you are is the ruh, the spirit from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put these innate emotions and innate physical desires in us as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent the guidance so that the ruh can regulate the innate emotions and the innate desires. And what happens when human beings do not feed the ruh the correct nutrition from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? The ruh slowly starves, and then the innate emotions and then the innate desires take over. Does that make sense? So a human being without acknowledgement that I need to be disciplined will not have discipline, will not have sabr, will be very irritable, will cause all sorts of things. A human being who doesn't have accountability or consequences of their judgment, you see all the killing that's happening all around the world. A human being that is very, very manu' will go as far as justifying stealing from everybody just so I can accumulate. Accumulate, that is a whole system that is jazu' will treat the perpetrator of a crime as a victim compared to the actual victim, like the justice system here. Somebody commits a crime, or he's got this issue, or he's got that issue. They start justifying the false actions of the perpetrator. What about the victim? A whole system is jazu', because they have gone away from the reality that the ruh needs to be nutritioned. And so, without the ruh being nutritioned, the physical desires take over. And that's when you start to realize that when Iblis or Shaitan rejected to prostrate to Adam, he didn't say that you have created him from a body and a soul. He said, خَلَقْتَنِي مِن نَارٍ وَخَلَقْتَهُ مِن طِينٍ. He only mentioned the physical body, giving you a clear signal that his ultimate goal of all his attacks to deceive you and whisper and take you away from the guidance is to starve your ruh and let the desires and the innate emotions that are inappropriately channeled take over. SubhanAllah. What do you see now? Everything out there is making you forget about the ruh. Everything out there has got to do just pushing you away from anything to do with spirituality. Focus on your look, focus on your money, focus on your house, focus on your car, focus on your clothes, focus on the quality of your food. Everything tangible, as if Shaitan wants you to just ignore and forget who you really are, the essence, the ruh. And we see it now. Everybody who chases these things, and when they get them, they're miserable. And Muslims have to be very, very careful of that and be realizing that, you hear a lot in the Muslim lectures and the rhetoric that we shouldn't be chasing dunya, we shouldn't be chasing dunya. We need the materialistic things, but not at the expense of the most essential nutrient, which is feeding the ruh with the guidance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because all of it is pointless. Prophet ﷺ did not have the biggest house. He had a small room. This masjid looks like a castle compared to the room of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. We're struggling with, when we got a 2005 Honda Civic or Toyota, well, they used to walk through the desert. We complain about our food. They used to just have dates and oil and a bit of grain. But it's not about the tangible stuff. Their ruh was well fed. Their ruh was well fed. And that's the biggest challenge I find living in a Western country that's not Muslim or not spiritual based as such, is that their idea of a happy life is feeding the physical materialistic body. But that goes against human nature. So we as Muslims have to be very, very careful of what we import into our mind as healthy nutrition from the non-Muslim society, and make sure that their ideology of chasing the materialistic equals success and happiness. It doesn't. You need these things, but the number one factor is the guidance of the ruh. And that is why, and we'll conclude with this, the subsequent 8 sort of verses in Surah Al-Ma'arij talk about the treatment of the disease of haloo'. إن الإنسان خلق هلوعا إذا مسه الشر جزوعا وإذا مسه الخير منوعا إلا, with the exception of المصلين الذين هم على صلاتهم دائمون والذين في أموالهم حق معلوم للسائل والمحروم والذين يصدقون بيوم الدين والذين هم من عذاب ربهم مشفقون إن عذاب ربهم غير مأمون والذين هم لفروجهم حافظون إلا على أزواجهم أو ما ملكت أيمانهم فإنهم غير ملومين فمن ابتغى وراء ذلك فأولئك هم العادون والذين هم لأماناتهم وعهدهم راعون والذين هم بشهاداتهم قائمون والذين هم على صلاتهم يحافظون. 9 treatments, and each one of them actually, probably each 2 require a whole session. But what I'm saying is that all these treatments that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala discloses in Surah Al-Ma'arij after showing you the disease have basically got to do with feeding the ruh with the correct nutrition. And it starts with salat. I said I'm going to stop, but I want to give you an appetizer for next time because salat is a very, very juicy topic. So, what does the word salat mean? I'll put it out there. What's in your mind about the word salat? What do you know of salat or namaz, the actual word? And that we all just say is prayer in English. What does the word salat mean? And this is not a judgmental question, I just want to gauge what people know about this word and what it actually means. Anybody? Huh? Haven't crossed, yeah? Why did Allah call it salat? You know, Allah said, Inna as-salata kanat ala al-mu'minina kitaba maqota. Why did He use that word? Connection? Yep. It's one dimension, correct? Hey? It's not the meaning. It's submission is part of salat, but it's not the meaning of the word. But I think submission is istislam. Yeah? I've challenged your mind, haven't I, with that question? Everybody's been learning about salat since they were in their mother's crib, but nobody knows what that word means. Okay, let's give you a beautiful image of what that word entails. So, as a brother said, one of the linguistic meanings of, or that is extrapolated from salat, sila, which is connection. We understand that that is the purpose of salat, to connect. And we understand how important it is to connect, and when you're disconnecting from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, your ruh is malnutrition and it suffers. But the word itself has got 2 very beautiful image context associated with it. Number 1, and hear me out. Everybody knows what a shepherd is. A shepherd that monitors the sheep. Anybody who's been to a farming community knows that the shepherd always has a stick with him. And that stick tends to be straight so they can tuck, 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 tuck. And so that stick in its origin, like you don't go to a tree and you find a perfectly clean, straight stick. It's always a branch. A branch is always curved. It's got leaves and it's got spikes and all sorts of things. And then so the shepherd will choose a branch in Arabic culture, remove the impurities from it. Just remember this process. Remove the impurities from it, but it's still bent. And what they used to do is they would generate a very small amount of heat, and they would place the bent stick close to the heat so that the stick becomes flexible, and then they are able to change it from being a bent stick to something that is upright. And that process from start to finish is called Salla al-Asa. What's the word? Salla al-Asa. The process of grabbing something that has got all sorts of impurities and frickles and that is bent and making it clean and upright is God, the word Salla al-Asa. And look at that imagery example of, this is one of the key word you said was connect, but the transformation that salat is supposed to have in you is similar to that process. You approach the salat, like we said, none of us is angels. You've seen something bad, you've said something bad, you've had a bad thought, you've got a prick, or you've got an impurity in you, and you need something to remove that impurity. And the image is that you are upright in your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and then when you start to compromise or you make bad decisions, you sort of lean down, and then salat comes and make you upright again. Subhanallah. That's one dimension of the word salat. The other dimension of the word salat is the same idea of heat. And so that whole process of a precious metal furnace. Anybody knows what a precious metal furnace is? So when they extract precious metals raw from earth, it's always got all sorts of dirt around it. And so they put it in a furnace between brackets to remove the impurities. And so that the inner beautiful nature of that precious stone, whether it's gold or silver or whatever it is revealed. But without that process of salah, or the furnace between brackets to remove the impurities, the beautiful inner goodness does not come to the surface. So these are some amazing meanings of what the word salat is. So it's not just standing up and down. These are the technicalities of salat. Your wudu and you're facing the qibla. These are the technicalities that are sort of heating up the furnace between brackets. You can't start the furnace without the heat. So you can think of it like that. But you're supposed to stand in salat, and then after that, you sort of molded, you become upright. You got a lot of impurities in your heart for things of that. You said this, you said that. And then the little heat of the salat removes it, and you come out a precious gem between brackets. That's what it does to your ruh. That's what it's supposed to do to your ruh. So that's an appetizer for next time, inshaAllah. We'll talk about what the word salat is and what the word da'imun is. That's another amazing word. And the amazing principle of haqqun ma'loom lis-sa'il wa mahroom. Jazakumullah khair. We better stop because Isha is in about 10 minutes. So we'll open the floor for any questions. If people have any questions, please feel free to ask. Otherwise, we'll start getting ready for the salat. Barakallahu fikum. Yeah. No, because the Arabic language, this is the thing. The Arabic language, the key words have got multiple layers of meaning. You probably heard me saying this here, but I'll repeat it. The key words in Arabic are loaded with layers of meaning. And that's how the Arabic language, I'm not sure how it's similar to Urdu or the African language, I'm not quite sure. But when it comes to English, English is very superficial. One word has got just one meaning, and it's very shallow, and that's it. There's no discoveries to be made when you say cat. A cat is a cat, and that's it. Whereas a lion in English, in Arabic, has got 77 names. 7 to describe a lion at different places, at different stages of life, and different placements in the herd, and so on. 77. The Arabic language has got 12 million words. The English language around 600,000. And so, yeah, the understanding the depth of the Arabic language really, really helps you uncover the gems of the Quran, and that it's not a superficial text, it's very contextual. There's context behind the words. It's not word for word you read on a page. Real live sort of, you can think of it as real live 3D words versus 2D on a piece of paper. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions, or everybody's scared? Had enough of HALOO'A Jazwa Minu? Look, absolutely. I personally, as an Arab, I learn a lot from the non-Arab speakers who are tackling this area of gap in the community. There's plenty of them online. There is each one has its pros and cons, but I like the speaker Nu'man Ali Khan. He addresses that area specifically. There's Umar Sulaiman, and there's plenty of other people as well that talk about this. It's just that it's not available on YouTube So most of the science is unfortunately at this stage in books. Hasn't made it to the screens yet. Hasn't made it to the screens yet. So with a bit of a drive to find it, you will find it, but it's not sort of out there accessible and in abundance as much as you wish it to be. So the one name that stands out to me is Nu'man Ali Khan. There's Umar Sulaiman. There's a guy in the UK. I forgot his name. That are out there as well. But in every Muslim community, like whether it's the Urdu speaking community or the African speaking community, you will find your own native scholars that have written like explaining the linguistic Arabic, and they've done it in your own native language. You will find it. It's just in books. Yeah, it's in books at the moment. So that's just one way to. It's a very enjoyable journey. Put it that way. Very enjoyable journey. I enjoy it more when I see it live because I like the 3D interaction rather than 2D in a book. It's more of a real life experience. But we'll get there. We'll get there. So I advise Nu'man Ali Khan, very accessible, and go from there. To only focus, not to learn Islamic scholarship or tafsir per se, but to learn the linguistic meanings of the Quran. And that works for some people. For some people, the linguistic meanings are not important. They want the scientific meaning, or they want the social meaning, or the tafsir is sufficient for them. That's fine. But there's, as you can see, there's some juicy stuff to be discovered. Any other questions? Let's get the. There's no questions. We start reading fresh, huh? Salam. Yeah, it's heading there. That's for sure. Well, the tips in dealing with that is that you treat your eye and your ear as a very, very tight border. You really need to have the approach that your eyes and your ears have got some border forces there. And that whatever environment you put yourself in, whatever conversations you have, or whatever you're reading or listening to, you got to be careful of just letting it go through unfiltered. Got to be careful. Because there's a human phenomena that happens which is called subconscious indoctrination. Have you ever shared that with you? Subconscious indoctrination. So subconscious indoctrination in psychology is that when you sit in an environment or you read a certain narrative over and over and over and over, whether it's true or not, it becomes implanted in you to be the truth. Which would explain how a lot of the stuff, like some people struggle to believe how the Zionists are so evil, but they've been taught from when they're in their mother's tummy the stuff that they're saying now, and they don't know anything else. So that's what subconscious indoctrination does. That if you keep letting information in that is incorrect, then your mind is going to shift. So the easiest way is not to let the information in and then fight and change it. The easiest way is to put filters, very clear filters. So for us living in the West, you got your work environment, you got your what you watch, what you scroll on, and the conversations you have with your people. Everybody here needs to go away and sort of judge what my environment that I'm working with is, my working environment, my school environment, my social media environment, my recreation environment, and am I receiving the correct messages from them or not? I'll give you a practical example. I know people who, because they can't control the message that comes from TVs, they don't have a TV at home. Most of us will think that these people are strict, or these people are boring, these people are not fun. But the reality is, because I can't control the message that the TV is sending across, I'm not going to have a TV. I'm not going to die if I don't have a TV. Or I don't have social media or reduce my social media because I can't control what I'm scrolling to see. Can you control what you see on social media? Anything that you see sends a message to your brain that that's okay. Everything that you see. That's why there's a huge war online now between the criminal narrative and the Palestinian narrative. Because if people see the stuff, their mind changes. So it's a battle for the mind. It's a battle for the mind. And so, but you are in control. You can't say just because I am in a Western country, I cannot control these things. You can't say that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Isra very, very clearly, إِنَّ السَّمْعَ وَالْبَصَرَ وَالْفُؤَادِ كُلُّ أُولَٰئِكَ كَانَ عَنْهُ مَسْئُولًا. This is a remarkable verse in Surah Al-Isra. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, the hearing and the seeing and the emotional heart, you are solely responsible for it. You might think that's too much, but if you watch crime over and over and over again, and then you go and commit a crime, and you say to the judge, well, because I've been watching this stuff, is that going to stand up in the court? No, it's not. That's the justice in this world, and that's the same principle in the hereafter. You can't use the excuse that because we are in a non-Muslim environment, and you become lazy at putting checks at the borders. I call them the borders, your eyes and your ears and your heart, and you allow the bad stuff to get in and say, oh, it's out of my control. No, you are in control of the borders. That makes sense? Yeah, so be very, very careful of what goes through these borders because you're in control. Once they go through, it becomes very hard to reverse. I hope that makes sense. Does that make sense? Alhamdulillah. Can someone كفارة المسجد سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. Can someone please do the adhan and we'll do the iqamah straight away, inshallah. بارك الله فيكم.